In other news,
Yeah, look,
in Oakland, they have nooses in trees. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. That was exercise equipment, but the Oakland mayor is still very angry about it. Did you did you see any of that? Have you paid attention to the Bay Area?
something about it. I caught something about it. It's so stupid.
Wait,
Uh,
can I read this from Libby Schaff?
yeah, please
Libby
do.
Schaff is the mayor of Oakland. So they found quote nooses. Nooses were reported at a park. Ah, right? They found nooses.
Mhm.
Turns out the nooses were exercise equipment. Um, but when you're a social justice warrior, that doesn't stop you. Here's what Libby Schaff, the mayor of Oakland, has to say. Symbols of racial violence have no place in Oakland and will not be tolerated. Several nooses found on trees around Lake Merritt were removed and will be investigated as hate crimes. Reports that they were part of exercise equipment do not remove or excuse their torturous and terrifying effects. Actually, they do. Actually, the fact that they're exercise equipment
Yeah.
does remove their torturous and terrifying effects, Libby. We're responsible for knowing the history and present-day reality of lynchings, hate crimes, and racial violence. And apparently, but not exercise equipment. We're not responsible for knowing the present-day functionality of exercise equipment. Objects that invoke such terror will not be tolerated in open public spaces. Libby Schaff, for those of you who don't know, Oakland is known for being like a corrupt piece of crap city. And Libby Schaff is the perfect person to represent Oakland. So not only in Oakland, but up in Rohnert Park, another one in the Bay Area, a Karen posted a picture on Facebook. I was walking in my neighborhood at Rohnert Park and came across what looks like a lot of nooses hanging from a tree. I need to call the police. So they called the police, right? Update from the police. The police confirmed that the rope has been in the trees since before COVID and was placed there for the kids to use as a swing.
Well, like to be fair to these people, they misuse the term gaslighting all the time. They will actually they misuse a lot of words. They say gaslighting when they mean you disagreed with me, but they are being gaslit, meaning they are being made to feel like they're crazy or they're being made hysterical in some ways by the media, by the narrative that's being put out. So there have been just the same way they cherry pick the stories of black men being killed by police, and if you start to look into the stats, you'll find that it's actually you are at greater risk of being killed by the cops if you are white, but they're never gonna talk about those stats. But so they cherry pick these individual cases. They show you these individual videos to try and create a narrative. And I do believe the intention is clickbait. They want views. I think it's also a bit more nefarious than that. I think they want us at each other's throats, like you talked about, distracted. They want us divided. They want a race war. They want any kind of war. They want a red and blue war. They want, they just want us not focused on the actual enemies to freedom and liberty and equality. They want us all infighting. But anyway, so one of the things they've been doing is cherry picking now and highlighting these stories of black men who've committed suicide by hanging. I don't know if you've seen this.
No, I haven't seen this.
But they've been pushing, oh, here's another black man who was found hung from a tree. And they're trying to say, they're planting the idea that there's something nefarious here, that this wasn't actually a suicide, even though it's ruled a suicide. They've highlighted a couple of these now. But if you look at the stats, if you look at the suicide stats, which are pretty sad, we never look at suicide, really. Cernovich was talking about this. Like, we don't like to look at suicide.
Right.
But there's a certain number of hangings that happen every week, of suicide by hanging that happen every week. We only pay attention to it when it's someone famous like Anthony Bourdain, but it happens all the time. And now they're taking something that we don't ever look at or talk about. So it's actually to their benefit, this narrative that they're trying to create. It's to their benefit that we never look at this or talk about it. So now they can say, look at these suicides by hanging. There's something happening here, right? And they're putting this idea in people's heads. So for these hysterical people who are calling the cops because they see ropes in trees, they're hysterical because the media is telling them that there's a rash of suspicious hangings now of black people happening.
Yeah.
I feel bad for them. I feel bad because it's just like the way they made people like myself hysterical during the election. So when Trump won, we were in hysterics because we
Right, you thought that Hitler was marching in to take over the White House. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And some people still believe all that stuff. That's why they're so
Right.
outlandish. Yeah.
Carrie, something that you're making me think of is, I know we talk about, there's the leaders of some of these movements who are, we'll call them like the Ellsworth Tuohys, the people who like know it's all, they have evil intent. They know it's crap. They're pushing it anyway.
Yeah.
They're like, right? And then there's the people who just like are bought in and like think that they're being against racism by or whatever, right? And I was thinking about this, and the thing that I think we maybe need to add a dimension to this viewpoint is the fact is that I think most people are on a scale between those. There's a lot of self-delusion that happens along this scale. So even someone like the mayor of Oakland, like Libby Schaaf, I don't believe that she is. I don't believe that Libby Schaaf is intentionally evil. I think that she is self-deluded. I think she has adopted some premises and brainwashed herself, taken some brainwashing in, also deluded herself enough that when she gets caught up in this stuff, it's real for her. She's caught up in it. Yes, she's propagating crap, but she's not doing it. I don't think she's doing it knowing that it's crap. I think she's like. Yeah. I think she might at some level sometimes about some things know that it's crap, right? But other things just totally has self-deluded. And I think probably most people that we see out in the public talking about this stuff, I would guess most of them are somewhere on the scale where they are, they're not wholly bought in and ignorant. They're not wholly above it, knowing it's evil and pushing it anyway. They're partly self-deluded and partly not.
Partly self-deluded, absolutely. And, I'm glad to hear you say that because this is something Carter and I have talked about a lot for anyone who's new. But I know there's a lot of people in it with good intent and who really believe it. And that's why they push it. But it's also that they don't. Laura in chat says, "Wow, Carter, that's an awful amount of grace. Carrie is wearing you down."
Well, I'll say that it doesn't excuse them from their behavior on a moral perspective. So
it does not excuse
I
them
can
from their
whip
behavior.
that grace right out from under them again. There you go.
Yes. And it doesn't excuse them. And I also think the only way that you can stay in it for as long as I did with good intent is you are not taking a you have to be in a place where you're not taking responsibility for making sure that your opinions are your own. You are operating from a place of dishonesty because you are speaking. Because once you start looking at it to figure out what it really is, you can't stay in it. Once you start investigating,
unless you actually are evil.
Unless you actually are evil and you want to use it to your own benefit for your own benefit, but once you start looking into it, so the people who are in it with good intent, I will say this: they are operating from a place of dishonesty, a kind of dishonesty, because they're not looking at it critically and they're just repeating stuff. It's a very lazy kind of. It's like I have good intent, I want to be a good person. This is a really lazy avenue of being a good person, is to start adopting this belief system and speaking all these phrases that I haven't looked into, and I haven't read any. A lot of them they're not historically well read. They don't they're not students of history. They don't really investigate what they're talking about.
I do actually think there's some moral culpability here for laziness, intellectual laziness, because I think the more abstract of a false premise you're willing to adopt, the greater negative consequences it has, right? Like it can really have deep ramifications. And if you are very active, then you need to be very sure of having investigated the premises upon which you act. And if you're acting, but haven't clearly gone to the roots of your philosophic premises that your action is based on, you are potentially a serial killer. Like you could be anything really bad because you haven't verified. Obviously, if you're not killing people, you're not a serial killer, but you could be supporting horrible things like that if you haven't verified the premises upon which your behavior is based. And I think most people Ayn Rand used to think that the fundamental choice that we had in terms of free will, she believed that free will came down to basically just one choice, and that was think or don't. So at any given moment, there was something in your brain, and you could decide to evade that thought or think about it more deeply. And it was painful sometimes to think about it more deeply. It was uncomfortable. But if you make the choice, it gets easier if you keep making the choice to think. That's the moral choice. But if you make the choice to evade, you go down this path of eventually accepting premises that are false. And she believed that was kind of the essence of free will and essence of morality, was how often, like, what do you do when it gets down to that thing where you, like, there's an uncomfortable truth or there's an uncomfortable idea you're confronted with? Do you think, or do you allow yourself to evade that thought to continue feeling the way you want to feel?
So many people evade. That's a human thing you have to fight against.
It is.
Anybody have to fight against.
Because it's easy to evade. It's the easy way out. It's the path of least resistance to evade the thought. Yeah.